applications for income eligibility, and we are also enrolling landlords who will receive payment. They also have to agree to a certain amount of program requirements. So we're going through that process right now. We last week launched a portal on our website, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, where people can look up what their application status is. So that's something that we were excited about because we know a lot of people are eager to kind of learn where they're at in the system. Allie, if you have anything else that you would like to say, please do.
No, that's a good summary of where we are. I did see a question in the chat. Yes, these are phase 1 payments that are being made right now, and phase 2 opens on Monday, July 6th. We start accepting applications for phase 2, which is being funded by the state. So you may have seen that PHFA has that application open on their website now. And I'm sorry, I think I might be jumping ahead. You may have wanted to speak about that separately.
No, you're fine. You're fine. That's a great transition. But before we make that transition real quick, I was wondering. So there was the helpline. There was the lookup on PHL Rent Assist to look at the status of your COVID-19 rental assistance application. But let's say someone's running into some issues. So let's say they're maybe some of their documents got misplaced, or they've been having trouble with communicating with their landlord, or they've run into some sort of a snag with the program. Where can they go to get help with that?
So
we have a help desk. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead, Allie.
We have a help desk, and if you go to the main website, phlrentassist.org, it does show you that there is a button that you can click to get help with your application, and then you can fill out a form to send an email to the help desk. We have a number of full-time staff that are working on just answering the questions that come into the help desk now. So that's really helpful. And we get all sorts of questions from, what is my status, to, when will my landlord get payment? Anything that you have a question about, we can look up your file and help you figure that out.
Yeah, and one more note that I want to make is after we launched the portal where you can check your status, we did receive a lot of questions because one of the statuses that you may see says that the city will reach out to you because you need to resubmit one or more income documents. We are doing that this week. So some of the folks who had that status received an email yesterday prompting them to resubmit certain payments, and more going out today and tomorrow. So by the end of this week, if you have been seeing that status on our website, you will receive an email with directions for how to resubmit. So that's one that a lot of people are asking about. So I just wanted to touch on it.
Sure. Yeah. So Allie, you already made this transition to the new rental assistance program. Let's talk about the new rental assistance program that's launching, that's starting to accept applications next week. And I think the application itself is available for people to look up online right now. So let's go ahead and talk about the phase 2 funding. So the first question I have is, if you applied for phase 1, do you need to reapply for phase 2, or are those same applications being used again?
I'll take that one. So unfortunately, we cannot use the same application for both programs. And that is because of how they're being funded. So one is money that's coming from the state. The other one is a mix of different funding sources where we were able to create our own application. So how it's going to work with phase 2 is that there's a form that you can see on the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, PHFA's website, as well as our website, that you can download, fill out, and mail in or drop off. And then we're turning that into an online form similar to phase one, where you can submit all of the information remotely online, adhere to social distancing guidelines, but the application will look exactly like the paper form that you can see right now on our website. And so we will have that portal up and running on Monday. So if you have the capacity or are used to filling out stuff online, I would suggest just kind of hanging tight until Monday, because you'll be able to submit it all from the safety of your home. There's some fireworks going off behind me, so I'm sorry about that. Although I'm sure other people in Philadelphia are experiencing similar things.
What are maybe some of the differences between the requirements for the new program and the old program? Like if I remember correctly, like if you were, say, receiving like a housing choice voucher or a Section 8 voucher, you couldn't apply for the old program, the phase one program. Does that apply to the phase two program also? And what are maybe some of the other similarities or differences between the two?
Well, some of the differences are that the state program has a higher average area median income that the families have to, or the households have to meet. And so this one goes up to 100% of AMI, which is a lot higher than what the city's rental assistance program was at. And I don't remember the number off the top of my head. Jane, do you?
100% AMI in the city of Philadelphia, because it also kind of groups in income from the surrounding suburbs. For a family of four is close to $90,000 a year. So that's not the exact number. And AMI is area median income. It's a technical term that we have to use, unfortunately, for kind of all of these bureaucratic reasons. It just means it's a way to measure where your income is in relation to other people in the metropolitan area. So for the first program, we were talking about 50% of area median income. The second program, you can be eligible if you make up to 100%, which is close to $90,000 for a family of four. So a lot more Philadelphians are going to be eligible for this phase than they were for the last phase, which is a very good thing. We're excited about that. Another thing that's different is for the first phase, we asked people to self-certify that they had a COVID-related income loss. Those of you who applied saw a checkbox in your application. And so for this program, we're going to need to show documentation. You're going to have to submit documentation that shows that your income was reduced by at least 30% or that you filed for unemployment. So different documents will be required, and the income threshold is much higher. Those are the two biggest differences.
Yeah, one of the other big, I would say, differences that we're still kind of talking to the state about is that right now they're saying that they can only the rental assistance will cover up to $750 a month. So, which, if your income, which doesn't really match with the income levels that they're looking at. So and there's still a lot of questions that we have for the state that we're trying to get answered.
So if I remember with the phase one program, there was a fair bit of coordination with the landlord, and maybe some restrictions on how things worked with your landlord. What are some of the do you still have that coordination with the landlord in the second phase? And are there any restrictions on landlords or particular restrictions on the kind of lease that you have, or anything like that in the phase two program?
Yes, there still needs to be a lot of coordination with the landlord. The state program has 3 different applications pretty much that all have to be completed and submitted simultaneously or close to one another. So one is for the renter, which they call the lessee application. And so we're going to get a lot of questions about what that means. And then they also have the portion for the landlord to fill out, and that two parts for the landlord to fill out, one with their basic information and one with kind of like a housing quality survey of what the state of the rental unit is. And they have to certify that the information that they're putting on those forms is accurate. And so we are in the process of trying to figure out the best way to collect all of those three different pieces together and, you know, make sure that they match up on the back end.
Yeah, and one more thing, just as it stands right now, the landlord must agree not to begin eviction proceedings for any other rent within 60 days from the last payment that was provided. So what that means is if your landlord has accepted grant payments through the phase 2 program, they have to agree that they will not initiate an eviction proceeding for 60 days following when they got the last payment. That's different than the phase 1 program, where landlords have to agree not to evict for quite a bit longer, but still similar requirement that you will be protected if your landlord is receiving this payment for a certain period of time after they've received the last payment.
Yeah, and in both cases, the landlord does have to agree to participate, and we cannot, unfortunately, we cannot force them to participate or to take the money. So, yeah, so the landlords do have to agree to, you know, abide by the terms and want to participate in the programs.
Okay, and yeah, just to clarify that that's the last payment from the program, not necessarily the last payment from the tenant.
Exactly.
Okay. Yep. We talked about the application process and how there's the online application and then there's the paper application, and that the two match each other. Now, if you're using the paper application, where would you take it to apply? Can you mail it in? Can you bring it to an organization like Turn or CLS? Oh, and before you answer though, we're going to switch our interpretation. Let's see. Just one sec. Just like, you know, when you're in radio and they got to do that little commercial real quick.
This is Liz. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Thank you.
So the question was, where
Así que la pregunta es,
someone who...
Wait.
I totally messed that up. Okay.
The question was, where can people who need to submit applications for phase 2 send those applications? And we will have directions on the website where you can also access the online application. In addition, we will have phone numbers and kind of resources similar to the way that we did for phase 1. We will be communicating out where you need to get in touch, where you need to drop them off, if there's a housing counselor near you that can help you. I don't have all that information today for you to provide, but we will be providing it. And if you inquire, you'll be able to kind of receive that detailed submission information on Monday.
Okay. On that note, where can people look up this information?
phlrentassist.org. That's the best place to go. That's where you can submit a help request. That's where you can see the status of your SIRA application, and that's where we'll be providing updates for this program and future programs. So that's the best place to go.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and also if you also need assistance with any other landlord or tenant issues, call the Philly Tenant Hotline, 267-443-2500, or also check out Philly Tenant.
.org.
Philly Tenant. Yep, Philly Tenant.
I sent a lot of people there at the help desk.
That's true. That's true. Yep. We do end up fielding a fair number of those calls.
Yeah.
Well, Jane and Allie, did you have anything else that you wanted to add before we switch over to Stephanie?
The last thing is just we know that people are very eager to get an update on the status of their application. We're trying our best. We've been kind of moving very quickly to try and get this assistance out as fast as we can and building the system as we're implementing it. So thank you, everyone, all the tenants and landlords who have gone through the resubmission process and have had to wait maybe 48 hours to have their help desk ticket answered. We really are doing our best, and we know that you guys really are too. So thank you, and try and bear with us.
Well, thank you, Jane and Allie, and maybe later on in the program, maybe later on into the rental assistance program, we might bring you back to talk about how it's going, or maybe answer some other questions that people are having.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep, thank you. Okay, Stephanie.
Hey, Vic.
How you
And
doing?
thanks, Jane and Allie, because really, like, when people call Turn, I'm going to tell you what we actually do. What we don't do is give out rental assistance, but people really want that right now. So thank you, too, for doing everything, all the work that you're doing.
Okay, so Turn.
Mm-hmm.
What is Turn?
Well, Vic, I'm glad you asked. So Turn is a nonprofit organization. Turn stands for Tenant Union Representative Network. We've been around for a few decades now, since about 2005 in our current form. Part of Turn got started. It used to be, people have been around Philly for long enough, they might remember something called TAG, which was, I believe it stood for Tenant Action Group. My boss, Phil Lord, the executive director, has been doing tenant organizing and representing tenants for a long time in Philly. And over the years, Turn has done a bunch of different things. Right now we have 2 units. We have the tenant rights unit, which I'm the manager of. And then we have another unit, the special needs unit, that manages essentially a bunch of housing counselors who are sort of like case managers. They manage some supportive housing programs for people with specific housing subsidies. But since I'm on the tenants' rights side, this tenants' rights event, so we're going to talk about what tenants' rights unit does today.
Yeah.
We really focus on, like, just in general, like 3 broad categories. We do advocacy, education, and representation. And now you can ask me more detailed questions about that.
Well, yeah, I was so I mean we've plugged the tenant hotline so many times on this program. I think just 3 times already today. And Turn, right, is one of the organizations that picks up that hotline. So when someone calls into Turn, calls in the hotline and selects Turn, what is their experience? What does Tenant do? Exactly, what happens?
Well, our hotline job is specifically giving out information and resources. So we direct, what we're trying to do on the hotline is direct people to the right organizations or the right resources that are going to help them. So rental assistance, community legal services, legal clinic for the disabled, whatever legal services or resources that we know of that can help people. And if people are calling with a question about their rights as a tenant, if we can answer that question or give them information to help answer that very briefly, we do that. But we do recommend that people, a lot of times our hotline directs people to our Know Your Rights workshops, because that's where you're going to get like the full rundown of what your rights are. So we have questions coming in from one of the participants about making repairs. That participant, I would really recommend going to one of the workshops, because one of the things we do is go through all of your options as a tenant to get your landlord to make repairs, which is a very common question. Whether or not we're in a pandemic, that's always a question, right?
Now, are those each individualized, like each session, is that do you end up going through the same sort of issues, or is it specifically directed toward the people that are attending?
It's a little of both. So we have a standard presentation that we start with, that because things are changing so much now during the pandemic, we update that. I update it whenever news comes in. So sometimes it's updated every day. And we also, the workshop's also an opportunity to ask questions. We don't give legal advice during the workshops, because that takes lawyers can tell you want privacy to give legal advice, because you want to be able to like talk about sensitive topics and have confidentiality and stuff like that. But you also, it also just takes too long when there are other people in the workshop. But if we so you can ask questions, we answer them in a general way. And a lot of times that's enough information for people to answer their own questions. And if we get through the workshop and you feel like you do want to sit down with somebody one-on-one and housing counselor or lawyer and talk some more about strategy and work through your next steps, we can sign you up for a one-on-one consultation, and then you get another a chance to talk your way through your whole situation with somebody one-on-one.
Okay. Now I'm going to change. Oh no, wait. There's one last question on that subject, which is, how do people get access to these?
Yeah, there's a link on our website to a registration form. It's we hold our workshops through Zoom, and I will also tell you the schedule.
Oh,
we have
before you do, what's your website? You
oh,
mentioned
sorry,
your website.
you're right. It's ourturn.net.
Our turn, and that's the letter R, right?
It can be either our or R. OURTURN.net or RTURN.net.
Okay.
And we and so the workshop schedule is, we do 8 workshops per week, so there's lots of opportunities. They're Monday through Friday at 12:30, and Monday and Wednesday evenings there's a second workshop at 6 p.m. and Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. And that's the same schedule that we do them in real life. The before the pandemic happened, we were doing them in person. Now we just moved that schedule online. So it is our usual workshop schedule.
Excellent. So now I'm going to shift subjects a little bit. TURN, right, stands for Tenant Union Representative Network. So there's something in that name that I don't think a lot of people are all that familiar with, which is a tenant union. So what is a tenant union?
That's a great question. A tenant union is often what the members make of it. Tenant union, we use that term. Some people call themselves a tenant council. It's really a group of tenants who get together and are collectively working for some kind of change. Whether it could be tenants all in the same building who are trying to work together to convince their landlord to make repairs, something like that. Or it could be a group of tenants from all over a city trying to push the government to make some changes. But the key is the two key ingredients are tenants and collective action. I think it is important to clarify that a tenant union does not have the same sort of legal structure as like a labor union. So if you're in a union at work, or if you've heard of labor organizing and workplace organizing, as soon as you start talking about unionizing, there's a whole set of laws that applies to that and things that your employer can do. That's not That's not the same thing with tenant unions. There's really only one. We do have legal protections that your landlord is not allowed to retaliate against you for joining up with a tenant council or a tenant union. But that's pretty much where the legal structure ends, and it's a group of people working together to try to achieve something.
Okay. So then what does TURN offer for tenant unions?
So we do, we offer advice and representation and ongoing support. So there have been, if you're going to form a tenant council or a tenant union, you want to come to us and talk about talk through what kinds of actions you might be able to do, what your legal risks are. Standing up for your rights there's almost always a risk when you stand up for your rights, right? Or when you're pushing to change and improve things. But it is important for people to know like what those risks are. And I think for the idea of collective action is to spread that risk around to make sure that just one person isn't the one who's sticking their necks out, that everybody's taking on a little bit, everybody's protecting each other. And so we can talk to individual people about the situation. We can talk to the group about what their choices are, help them brainstorm. If we're talking about something like a group of people withholding rent, we can guide you through setting up accounts to set the rent aside and stuff like that. Help you evaluate what your different ideas are likely to, what your different actions are likely to result in. Help you negotiate with the landlord. Sometimes we do have some lawyers on staff, including myself, so we do some representation. Sometimes if there is retaliation or if something comes up where you formed a tenant union and now the risks have intensified and now you need a lawyer. It depends on the situation. It depends on the group of tenants and what each situation needs, really.
So you mentioned collective action and working together to achieve sort of a common goal. And I think we've seen a lot of that with a lot of the advocacy that's happened for tenants, especially over these past few months, to try to get the protections that we've seen pass through City Council. I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit, maybe about some of the bills we've talked about. I think some of the details of number of the bills while they were going through City Council. But at least your understanding of where just what are some of the new protections that tenants should expect to see once the mayor signs these bills, which were the Emergency Housing Protections Act bills,
yep.
which passed through City Council just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and I also, before I get into the substance of those, I just want to mention something about so like collective action. I'm glad you brought that up in this context, because collective action can also mean political action, right? We do have there were a couple of City Council members who wanted to sponsor renter protection bills, who were the leaders within City Council. But you're not going to get, you need more than 3 or 4 votes to get things passed in City Council. So collective action can also be showing your elected representatives that there's the political will, that the people really want this stuff to pass. And it doesn't matter if there's one person in City Council or 2 or 3 people who are diehard proponents. This is their one issue that they're bringing. They're still not going to get it passed if enough other City Council members don't hear from their constituents and hear that this is something that's necessary. So you don't have to be in a tenant union to participate in stuff like this. When we're talking about collective action, is like anything that people are doing together to advocate for change. So it is really, it is a large part of getting these bills passed, or because so many people contacted City Council and got together with neighbors and made phone calls and stuff like that. But so, yeah, so 5 bills were part of the Emergency Housing Protection Act. I don't, they haven't been signed yet, right? Or do
No,
we,
yeah, I don't
since
think
our,
so.
since our meeting yesterday
My
afternoon when I talked about it,
my understanding is that they're supposed to be signed later this week,
right?
but I don't
It
believe that
could,
they've been signed yet.
it could be any minute now. The
Any
pen could be
minute,
hovering over
right
the papers
now.
as we speak. So yeah, so like Vic said, these 5 bills got passed through City Council a couple weeks ago. They're waiting for Mayor Kenny to sign them. The general things that they address are they're working together to sort of reduce the hardship for renters during the COVID-19 crisis. And some of them apply to once they go into effect and get implemented. So everybody has to be like a little bit cautious about relying on them right now, because some of them take some additional actions and implementation before they're useful. But so one of the bills is a moratorium on landlords moving evictions forward. So that would, once it goes into effect, it should apply to evictions that were started, like eviction cases that were filed before the shutdown. It'll stall the landlords from moving forward with them once it's in effect and implemented. And also would stall new eviction cases from being filed and moving forward if it's something that's come up during the crisis. And that would just be in effect. I should also say that all of these are just temporary because they're all designed for the emergency part of Emergency Housing Protection Act is this emergency. It's not permanent, except for one of them. So that moratorium would end August 31st. So the timeline for evictions might be, is likely to be stretched out a little bit longer. Should I just give a quick overview of the other 4 also? Do you want to talk about one first?
Let's go through the other one that doesn't require a financial hardship.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a question about financial hardship and
Sure.
what qualifies as a financial hardship. So then I think we can do those together.
Okay, cool.
After that.
Okay, and then the other one that just applies to everybody is an amendment to the already existing Fair Housing Ordinance. Well, I think they're all amendments to the Fair Housing Ordinance, but it is adding penalties, financial penalties to landlords who do illegal self-help evictions. So, so question about the moratorium we'll come back to as soon as I'm finished with this, okay? Mm-hmm. Currently in Philadelphia, so this is one of the things we cover in our workshop also in great detail. The only legal way your landlord has to enforce the terms of your lease, which could be paying rent, when the end of your lease is, anything that's in that lease, the only legal way your landlord has to enforce any of those terms is to take you to landlord-tenant court and get a judicial order. If they want to evict you because you haven't complied with the lease, they have to go through they have to go through court. They have to get an order from a judge saying that you can move out, saying that you have to move out. And in Philadelphia, any steps that they take to force you out, to coerce you to leave involuntarily without a judicial order is illegal. It's a self-help eviction. There's a criminal ordinance prohibiting it. And the new ordinance, and that's part of the Emergency Housing Protection Act, adds financial penalties. So tenants who go through this, whose landlords put them through this, will have a claim of up to $2,000 against their landlords per incident. So if you ever heard of landlords doing this, some of them change your locks, then the next day they cut off your water. Under the new law, it would be $2,000 for each time they take a step like that, up to $2,000.
Now, before we get into the 3 bills that require a financial hardship, we're just going to switch interpreters right now.
Vamos a cambiar los intérpretes ahora mismo.
Okay. Okay, so we have 3 bills that apply to financial hardship that require a financial hardship. I think it's late fee waiver, payment agreements, and the eviction diversion program. Now, when we're talking about a financial COVID-related financial hardship, what does that mean? Like, does it mean you have to have lost your job, or does it mean you just had a loss in hours? Yeah. So what does it mean?
It means a lot of things, actually. These bills are written very broadly to capture lots of different situations that people could find themselves in. So loss of job, loss of hours. If you were an independent contractor or self-employed and you lost income, that'll count too. The laws lay out a few extra things, like if you were unable to continue working or had to put money into caring for a loved one who had COVID-19 or something related, or your kids couldn't go to daycare, so somebody had to take care of them. There's lots of different variations on this. And so the likelihood is that if you know that you lost income because of COVID-19, there's a very high likelihood that you are going to qualify as having financial hardship under this law.
Excellent. Okay, so I think we had just a few bills that I think we can sort of put together. So I think one, right, is the late fee waiver bill. Essentially,
yep.
Right, you don't, if you have a financial hardship, COVID-related financial hardship, landlord can't collect late fees.
That one's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah. Payment agreement bill. I mean, I think we know what a payment agreement is, but what are some of the details about it?
Yeah, so the other two, the payment agreement bill and the diversion program are direct your landlords to take certain steps to try to resolve the non-payment issue before they actually file an eviction case against you. So the payment agreement bill requires landlords, if you have told your landlord, there's a requirement to tell them in writing, but you have to tell them that you've suffered financial hardship. If your landlord wants to evict you on non-payment of rent, they first have to give you 60 days notice in writing, and they have to offer you a payment plan before they can take you to court. And I believe that payment plan has to be up to 9 months long. It can't be, just to give you an example. So we've had some people call the hotline saying, my landlord offered me a payment plan, but I have to pay off 4 months worth of rent in 2 months on top of my ongoing rent. And that's not workable when I'm still out of work. And so that's the kind of sort of bad faith offer, or like I should say not good faith offer, that this bill is designed to avoid. So it's really spreading those payments out over time to give tenants a fair chance to pay them off, and to give landlords a better chance to actually collect their rent money, to be honest. So yeah, so there's some pretty significant requirements in that bill.
Now, I think the last bill is the diversion program, but I think maybe we'll save the diversion program for another episode.
Yeah.
Especially because some of the pieces are still being announced.
Yep.
But we had a question on Facebook about housing discrimination, and from what I understand, housing discrimination is one of the things that TURN specializes in, right?
I wouldn't say specialized. We cover it. We cover the basics in the workshop for sure.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, but the Fair Housing Rights Center is the place that we refer people to. I say in the workshop, if you think you have discrimination, Fair Housing Rights Center is a great place to start. We can help. We can certainly help with some of that stuff. But especially if it's a case where it'd be hard to prove discrimination, the Fair Housing Rights Center, who I'm sure you must have had them on the show at some point, or will in the future, I'm sure, can help you build up that case in a way that it's TURN doesn't. But we definitely will help people with Fair Housing Commission complaints and stuff like that.
Okay. Now, Stephanie, I think we're going to be wrapping up pretty shortly.
Cool.
Did you have anything else to plug? Any last words about TURN?
Yeah, I guess I want to mention a couple of other services that we offer. So we do have an arrangement. We have a program set up for voluntary mediation with the Good Shepherd Mediation Program. And if a tenant would like help So the mediation is you get a third party, a neutral mediator. They're doing the mediations on Zoom and or on the phone. The idea of mediation is to help both parties work out an agreement that works for both of them. So the goal is a win-win. And if your landlord's taking you to court, or if you're going to take
Oh, Stephanie, I think you froze on my end. But I'm going to plug your website, which is, oh, there we go. Now you're back.
Oh, am I back? Okay. Mediation program. It's voluntary. If your landlord, if you think your landlord's going to be interested in it, contact us and we can set you up with it through the Good Shepherd mediation program. And you also get a tenant advocate to be available to you during the mediation to check in with. It's one of our staff members. Check in with her if you get an offer from your landlord. You want to make sure you're not giving up too many rights. So you just want to clear it with them. That's part of the service. It's free. Landlord background checks on our website, also rturn.net. For $10, we look up all the public records and tell you what's important if you want to get some dirt, the public dirt on your landlord, publicly available dirt, and anything else. Yeah, then the workshops and organizing support, the main things.
Okay. And Allie and Jane, right, the phase 2 is going to start taking applications on June 6th, just next week. I did have one last question about that occurred to me afterwards, which was if a tenant is applying and doesn't have, say, all of their documentation together right when they're applying, should they hold off until they have everything together, or should they apply and then provide supplemental, supplemental documentation afterwards?
Yeah, that's a very good question. For phase 1, we required people to submit an ID and a lease for the first application, and then reached out to them so that they could submit income documentation. For this version, you should submit all of your income documentation with the first part of the application. We're still getting clarity from the state as to whether or not your landlord and you need to submit your components of the application together, or whether you can, whether we will be able to accept them separately. So that will be clear on our website, and any communications that we kind of roll out on Monday or later this week. But definitely submit a complete application. This one also is not, there's not going to be a random selection process, but we do have quite a bit more money than we did for the first one. So just hold off, submit your complete application, and then also if you wait to submit the complete application, your application is going to get processed more quickly on our end, which I know is something that people are frustrated by. So just submit as much info as you can, please.
Okay. And people can go to PHL Rent Assist to look up any of this information. Allie and Jane, did you have any last minute things to plug before we hop off?
Well, there was one question that popped up, which was whether or not this one will be random selection. The first phase 1 was and still is random selection. Phase 2, we are not allowed to do random selection. So we will be processing applications as they come to us complete. So if you submit your application and it's missing some stuff and we have to reach back out, your application will be considered submitted when we get the complete version of it. So that's another difference between the phase 2 program and the phase 1 program, is that this one is, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but unfortunately not random selection.
Okay. Well, Jane, Allie, Stephanie, thank you very much for being here. For any of the comments any of the commenters who had questions about specific cases, I would suggest you call our hotline, the Philly Tenant Hotline, and you might get Stephanie, you might get me. It's 267-443-2500, and we might be back next week. We might not, considering how it's the 4th of July holiday, and courts are might be opening up on Monday. But yeah, but thank you everyone for having for coming, and we'll see everyone again on Tenant Tuesday, maybe next week, but it might be a little bit after that. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.